Hello everyone, and welcome to game number 17 of the 1960 World Chess Championship match between Mikhail Tal and Mikhail Botvinnik. And as the title of the video suggests, we are in for one wild ride. As you can see in the quote above the board, c7, c6, strictly speaking, this is a challenge. What Tal means by this is that after he played e4 on the first move, Botvinnik again responded with c6, the Caro-Kann defense. Stating that even though Tal is still 2 points in the lead, Botvinnik is not in any sort of a hurry to win back the points he's behind in this match. And again, he wants to see if Tal will try to improve on his variations and if he can get because basically in every game so far, Botvinnik got at least an equal game with the Caro-Kann. It was only in game number 15 that Tal had like a slight advantage when the queens got off the board, but it wasn't enough for any sort of a victory. So d4, d5, knight to c3, d captures, knight captures, bishop to f5, so the classical variation once again, knight to g3, bishop to g6, and now bishop to c4. Again, the very sharp variation. Tal says that in those days h4 was the most analyzed move, and it was considered that h4 gives the white the most advantage. But Botvinnik, of course, knew that as well. And Tal also says that there was also this very interesting idea of playing f4, but f4 and only after black plays e6, then go h4, which kind of seems weird, weakening your king like this, but it does have a nice firm grip on the e5 square, and if black is really unprepared, then maybe you can surprise him. And I was very happy when I read this, as it was some 10 years ago. I played against, I believe it was against a candidate master, and I won a very nice game using this f4 idea. So after bishop to g6, bishop to c4, Tal still isn't interested in the f4 idea. E6, now comes knight to e2, knight to f6, now Botvinnik goes for a different line. He doesn't want to play bishop to d6 and then part with his dark square bishop, so here rather Botvinnik will part with his light square bishop. Knight to f4 by Tal, bishop to d6, attacking the knight, and now knight captures on g6, h captures on g6, and bishop to g5. Here, bishop to g5, Tal wasn't very happy with this move. It's really not doing anything. Botvinnik can always go for queen to a5, check the king, and also attack the bishop on g5, and then Tal will have to retreat. But you know, it's giving basically black a choice to decide what to do. A lot of options here. So Botvinnik decides knight b to d7, not rushing anything. We have castles here, although after the game Tal did consider that castles was maybe a bit too optimistic. You know, Botvinnik does have an open h file for the rook, maybe queen to e2 followed by a queenside castle would have been better. So we have castles, and now queen to a5, now attacking the bishop. And this is the critical moment of the game, not the critical one, but the critical one in Tal's mind, because here, and since you did enjoy that part from the book in my previous video, I prepared another one for you. So here in this position, queen to d2 seems like the move you want to play, protect the bishop on g5, also offer a trade of queens, but again, Tal has the white pieces, it's move 12. It's move 12, you don't wanna trade queens like immediately. So here Tal played pawn to f4, and pawn to f4 is in everyone's mind, and Tal's as well, is like a totally crazy move. And here is a part from the book that I prepared, and it also goes with the title. F2, F4, question mark and an exclamation mark. Terrible, anti-positional, incredible. White's last move was so adorned by all the commentators without exception with such epithets, it might be supposed that the player who had white was absolutely unfamiliar with any chess book that writes about the game from White's point of view, and it is actually impossible to play like this since the move f4 weakens the black squares, locks the g5 bishop out of play, that's this guy here, and puts the white king in a dangerous and compromised position. So yeah, the white king is on g1, the rook is nicely eyeing that h2 pawn, and now even this diagonal is open. So sorry about that. So a very bold move, this f4. But even though everyone said it was a totally crazy move, not necessary, that it was totally anti-positional, the engine actually likes it. So another thing, Tal said that White didn't have too much moves there. Okay, h4 was also an idea instead of f4, but he really didn't want to play queen to d2, and this is a move Botvinnik certainly didn't expect, and now Botvinnik has to refute it over the board. And Tal said that it took him some 8 minutes to decide on this f4 move, and in those in those 8 minutes, Tal also considered a lot of things. For example, one of the things Tal discussed is will he be able to catch a movie with his wife after the game? So yeah, so why not f4? I mean, it's the drowning hippo all over. So here Botvinnik castles, and here Botvinnik again accepts the challenge as he castles queenside, and now he will use the h file for attack. In the future, this rook can come to h5, maybe h4, double rooks on the h file, and start a very nice attack. We have a3. Tal will of course prepare b4, and here it took Botvinnik over 30 minutes, so over half an hour to decide on his next move, and Tal was already happy with playing f4, because if Botvinnik spends half an hour on his next move, then that's basically worth it. Here Botvinnik played queen to c7. Another idea Botvinnik could have gone for is c5, but after c5, Tal could play b4 now, attacking the queen, and you don't want to capture the pawn, allowing Tal an open a file. So after queen to c7, b captures on c5, now you get bishop captures on c5, and it's a pretty fine position for both of them. You can't capture the bishop. If you capture, queen captures with check, picks up the light square bishop. It's a better position for black. So Botvinnik immediately goes queen to c7, now c5 would be a threat, as b4 doesn't come with an attack on the queen, and Tal pushes b4 immediately. Knight to b6, attacking the bishop, bishop to e2, and here Botvinnik goes for bishop to e7. Here, some of the commentators shared an opinion that e5 was an excellent move for black. Tal in his book didn't really agree with this, although it seems the engine does agree with it. Because after the variation Tal gives in the book, pawn captures, bishop captures, and bishop to g4 check, as you can't capture the bishop. The pawn is pinned, there's a rook eyeing the queen, but the bishop to g4 is an extremely strong defensive move, and this is a move Tal gives that kind of says that this is why the variation doesn't work for black. Because now after king to b8, c3, defending, now there's a rook captures on h2, king captures, bishop captures on g3 with check, king moves, and now rook to h8 with check. You have to block this with the bishop. Now comes knight to e4, threatening the c3 pawn and the f2 square. Bishop to e3, defending here, and now knight to d5, attacking the bishop, and here this c3 pawn. And it seems it's an extremely dangerous position for white. You know, just by looking at it, you can feel black is better, but you know, seems like too complicated of a position, because even after the game, even after analyzing it, Tal doesn't think that e5 is worth playing for black. So bishop to e7, Botvinnik agrees over the board that e5 doesn't work. Queen to d3, and now knight f to d5. c5 was definitely an idea here for Botvinnik, but again, he probably spent too much time, he didn't want to overcalculate it. Knight f to d5, bishop captures on e7, queen captures on e7, and now c4. c4 is again a move that requires Botvinnik to spend quite a lot of time thinking about the variation. Botvinnik played knight to f6, and here Tal was extremely happy. Now he felt that his f4 move was even great, because Botvinnik could have decided to go for knight captures on c4, and after queen captures on c4, queen to h4. This could have been a dangerous idea for Tal. And now you have an option here. You can't really play h3 with the idea of giving back the piece, because now you're just lost. Knight comes to e3, your queen is attacked on c4, you have to move the queen. Now queen captures, you're threatening queen captures on g2 with checkmate. After bishop blocks, now you get rook captures on h3, and after you play queen captures on e3, now you get rook to h8, and there is no defense against rook to h1. So the only idea here after queen to h4 is actually to play rook to f3. And now after queen captures, king moves, white defended, and it's a perfectly fine position for both white and black. So Botvinnik decided not to do this. He played knight to f6, and now we have rook to b1. Rook to b1 is a bit too over-optimistic a move, as Tal puts it. You have to protect the d pawn, although although you kind of want to try. Tal did say that he kind of did consider a4 immediately, but then queen captures, a5 comes, and now knight captures on c4 is a possibility. And here, even if he doesn't capture the piece immediately, he can go rook to b1. Now comes queen to d2. Queen captures on c4, but now comes queen captures on d4 with check. Queen captures, rook captures, and Tal would be up a piece, but Botvinnik is up 3 pawns. Tal doesn't want to play this position against Botvinnik. So, like we said, rook a to b1, but now Botvinnik simply plays queen to d7, threatens to capture the d4 pawn with the queen. And here Tal admits his mistake of playing rook to b1. He plays rook to d1, but also gives that if you play something like this, then rook to h4 is a very dangerous move, attacking the pawn, and after you defend it, queen to c7, attacking the pawn once again. And now you would have to bring the rook back, rook to f1. And after queen to d7, here you would again either have to beg for a draw with rook after d1, hoping that Botvinnik replies again queen to c7, or you would have to suffer in this position. So instead, rook b to d1, basically wasting a tempo. King to b8, we have queen to b3 now, queen to c7, and a4. Now preparing to push those pawns. Rook to h4, attacking the pawn. A5 now, knight to f8, and now queen to e3, defending the f4 pawn. Knight to e7, and now comes queen to e5. Not really offering a trade of queens, because captures and captures would be practically winning for Tal, because after rook captures, where do you go with the knight? If you go to e8, you get rook to d8 check, picking up the knight, so you'd have to go knight to g8, so the knights protect each other, but now you get this knight to e5 move, knight to e4 move, and after rook captures on f4, knight comes here, and the rook on f4 really doesn't have anywhere to go. Unfortunately, everything is protected here, all of these squares are covered, and g3 is coming. Whatever you play, knight to h6, you can try to bring the piece into the game, but g3 and the rook is trapped. You either have to give up the rook with rook to g4 for the bishop, or with rook to f5 for the knight. So a very tricky move, queen to e5. Rook h to h8, and now b5. Pawn captures, and now queen captures. He didn't want to capture with the pawn. He wants the open b file, and now he avoided the trade of queens, as it is no longer favorable for Tal. We have a6, kicking the queen away, queen to b2, and now rook to d7. An excellent move that prepares doubling up on the d file, and also protects the b7 pawn even more. c5, and now king to a8. We have bishop to f3. Eyeing that b7 pawn twice, and now knight to c6. And here Tal plays bishop captures on c6. He says you don't want to lose this strong bishop, but the threat on the pawn on d4 was too great. Queen captures, now rook to f3, queen to a4, and rook to d3. Rook to b3 was also an idea, but Tal feels that now rook to d3 is even better. Rook to c8, and now rook back to b1. Now it's very important to get some pieces to the b6 square, hopefully the rooks. Botvinnik plays queen captures on a5, showing that Botvinnik even has time in a sharp position like this to grab a pawn. Rook to b3, now with this super battery on the b file, threatening to capture on b7. Queen to c7 defending, and now queen to a3. We have king to a7, you don't want to allow any sacrifices here. We have rook to b6, and now queen to f4, capturing a pawn. If you play something like knight to d5 here, that is possible to attack the rook, but it's too complicated. After knight to e4, a lot of complications arise, and Botvinnik decides not to do this. He plays queen captures on f4. Now he has a lot of ideas, like knight to d5, queen to e3 check, maybe even exchanging queens. So knight to e2, attacking the queen, queen to e4, and now queen to b3. The idea of queen to b3 is checkmating Botvinnik, of course. Now, if you play something like g5, for example, to actually see the threat here, the threat is rook captures on a6. and after you play this, it's impossible to do anything with black. If you capture it, then comes queen captures on b6, king moves, and after queen to a6 check, rook blocks, queen to c7, queen to c8. This would be checkmate. On the other hand, after this rook captures on a6, if you don't capture it, if you play king to b8, then you get rook 8 to b1. Rook b to a1. After knight comes here, rook checks, king moves, now rook captures, king captures, and c6, and c6 wins the game. Whatever you play, you lose. If you block with the rook, then rook to a8 is checkmate. If you capture it, then you get rook checks, king moves, and queen b8. This also checkmates. So a very hard position for Botvinnik to defend, especially in such a time trouble. So after queen to b3, Botvinnik played queen to d5. Now the same idea doesn't work, but he misses one move. Here Tal does play rook captures on a6. Botvinnik plays king to b8, and now the idea of rook to a1, like in the variation we've shown, doesn't work because Tal's queen is under attack. But here Tal plays queen to a4. This is move 41. Tal reached time control, and here the position should have been adjourned if Botvinnik would write down what move he will play tomorrow. But unfortunately, as he couldn't find a defense from checkmate, he decided that he will not continue this game, and he resigned in this position. Why did Botvinnik resign? What's the idea here of queen to a4? You can pause the video and find the answers for yourselves. The problem is, if you try to escape, for example, I will show king to c7, then you get simply queen to a5, you have to go back, and rook to a8, this will be checkmate. And if you try a different kind of move, for example, let's say you try b6 to prevent queen a5 check, then you get rook captures, and after king here, to try now to escape to d8, now comes the beautiful rook to c6 check. Queen captures, and now queen to a5. Again, this comes with check, and you have to put the queen in between the queen and the king. So queen here and queen captures on b6. This will be checkmate. So yeah, after queen to a4, Botvinnik resigned the game, and now Tal is 3 points in the lead. So already very close to winning that World Chess Championship title. So yeah, a crazy game, a totally anti-positional move, f4, and a totally confused Botvinnik who is spending like more than an hour in the next couple of moves to try and refute it, but fails in time trouble. He blunders with queen to d5. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I do hope you enjoyed the part of the story that I added, and yeah. I would like to thank Michael Warden, Joel Meshi, and Peter Schachtel for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, hopefully with another interesting game. Thank you all, and I will see you soon.